So I'll just go ahead and get started with this. So what we'll go through today is I want to give you guys an introduction in GIS, a kind of gentle introduction, more gentle than you'd get like in like an official class, right? Just kind of give you a taste of it and give you some concepts so you understand some of the kind of language behind it. If you and it's a great thing to have, like a skill to have on your or a tool to have on your tool belt. I know we're actually hiring one of our team members over here. We have a vacancy, and I think about 3 of the applicants that are actually were given interviews had GIS experience. It does look very good on a resume. It does look good. So just interesting, kind of in the same vein that like coding and programming would be. It's an interesting kind of topic for people to see, or skill for people to see on a CV or resume. But I'll go through just some general stuff with it. I'll give you some kind of examples of how it relates to entomology. I believe just about everybody here is entomology based, but like a lot of this, if you're thinking about switching over to some other part of science or biology, this all can kind of transfer to that. It's very similar. And then I'll talk about some software stuff, but I'm just going to keep it pretty general with that. And then I'm going to finish off with showing you some of the stuff I do in my job to give you an idea of what that would look like if you were to take, especially if it was multidisciplinary, if you were to take a position that integrated GIS regularly into it, just to give you an example. So I made a joke with Mara about the applicants that were saying they had experience with GIS. I told her, I was like, you should ask them to what GIS stands for. That was my joke with her. It's a very mean thing to do. I would never do that, and she would never do that. But I didn't know what GIS stood for. Probably my first year into my grad program at UWF, which was really not that long ago. So I never bothered to look at it. I was like, it's GIS. But it stands for Geographic Information System. And you break that down, geographic, so anything based on location, right? So we're talking about location data, location information. Information is technically defined as interpreted data. So any data that we've looked at, analyzed, and reached some sort of conclusion or some idea about. And then system is going to be anything that kind of works together. So it's a set of things working together for some sort of mission, some sort of something to be done with it. So it's a really great definition for GIS because GIS gets kind of like thrown out there for a lot of things because it's in just about everything now. And there are so many fields that are basically relying on GIS that we don't even think about. I know we have to do discussions like any other online class, you have to do discussions, and I'm always amazed all the different fields people come from. I mean, I think the one that like kind of was the kind of more not off the wall, but it was like hospitality, which of course that makes sense. Like they have a degree in hospitality, they're using GIS to kind of amp up their skills for their career. It makes sense now that I think about it, why they might want GIS, but I would have never thought about that before. So, like I said, GIS is everywhere. You can find it in all aspects of definitely biology, but infrastructure, any kind of urban anything uses GIS, things you wouldn't even think about, like roads being paved. They have to utilize GIS to see where those roads can be paved, where they can probably be paved, where you're not going to have any issues, where the riskier areas or the more expensive areas to purchase for, you know, urban building, anything like that. Whenever they're buying property to build an apartment, there's a risk assessment they do using GIS to see, okay, is this land the most profitable? Is this going to be riskier? Are there issues with this? So conservation uses it. There's a ton of monarch butterfly maps out there. If you type in monarch butterfly in Google, you will find a map very quickly. A lot of people love to map that, a lot of story maps, fun little things to look at on there because it's interesting and it's important. And there's some obvious ones. So GPS, obviously, right? That's going to be utilizing GIS. We're looking at some sort of location data. We're utilizing that. It's satellites, of course. Satellites are the main reason we have most of our components within GIS. And then hurricanes, storms, natural disasters, public health, all of those utilize GIS more and more. So The requirements to work on GIS, there's three things that are required of you from the start, right? So if you don't have these, I don't know. First thing is basic computer skills. Now, this one, is it possible if you don't have basic computer skills to maybe handle GIS? Maybe, but you've joined this online talk, so you've got basic computer skills, right? You figured it out. So for the most part, you're probably fine. More importantly is problem solving skills. I cannot tell you how many times I've like kind of banged my head on the desk trying to figure out something. I just had to compartmentalize it and take it piece by piece. You have to be able to solve a problem. But honestly, that's most of these things. That's research, that's science. You have to be a good problem solver. And if you're already in this field, that's already something that you've had to deal with and had to nurture a little bit, that skill. And then a bit of patience, really honestly, a lot of patience, not just for learning, but like I still will get kind of like, I'll get a task I have to do and I'll be like, and maybe I did it like 3 years ago one time and I'll be like, how did I do that? How did I do that? And I'll have to rework it, or maybe the software is just not wanting to work with me, right? It's not wanting to work. And I've a lot of times, like Ron Swanson, wanted to throw my stuff in the dumpster because I'll get frustrated, it'll crash, I'll lose like an hour of work or 3 hours of work. So it does take some patience, like most things. So paths for, and I have to make all my presentations kind of cute. So sorry if it's sickening. So a path, career paths in GIS, there's kind of three options, like most things. You have academia, so research. Most researchers in some way are going to touch GIS one way or another. Maybe not directly, maybe indirectly, but if you're doing any kind of research, especially in a life science, there's going to be some point where location matters. Unless you're completely like in vitro sequestered in the lab and you're only worried about what it looks like in the lab, then maybe not, but generally everything has to leave the lab, right? You have to have field studies. So when you have field studies, location matters greatly. Government, that's me. That's where I am. So government, there's a lot of GIS in government. Like infrastructure is a big deal. GIS is a big deal in infrastructure, but just even little things you wouldn't even think about. If you type in GIS into like US jobs or something like that, you'll get a lot of different jobs pop up, a lot of GIS positions. And then industry. So mostly with industry, you have consultants. So that's like probably the large section of industry. You have these companies that all they do is just like a tax attorney, like a tax attorney office. All they do is they provide GIS expertise to other companies or maybe even some government entities. So that's most of the industry, not all of it. Some industries have their own GIS team, some of our larger businesses. And then focusing on entomology. So where would you possibly go if you were staying in entomology? Where would you be utilizing GIS maybe the most? Pest control. So that's kind of our wheelhouse over here, right? We deal with a lot of pest control. There's a couple obvious things, like if a plane is treating, especially like with mosquito control specifically, they have to know where they're treating, right? They have to have the area that they're treating, and that all takes GIS. Research. So I just kind of already explained that, where research would be where they apply GIS. Conservation, like I said, with the monarch butterfly. It's very important to know where things are. When you're worried about conservation, you need to know where your protected lands are. You need to know where your protected animals are, your protected fauna and flora. You need to know where they are and be able to track them. And you definitely require GIS for that. And then public health. So COVID-19 is the big example with that one. I don't know, some of you might recall the scary COVID-19 dashboard. I think I have a video of it later. That was kind of a famous dashboard during COVID-19. We all had bookmarked, right? Because we would fear monger. Well, we would basically, the start of doom scrolling, we would look at that dashboard and freak out. But it was very effective. And it's definitely public health. It utilizes GIS regularly. So I just want to show you some kind of really cool examples of GIS to get you intrigued. And then I'll go into like some minor kind of instruction and basics with GIS. So this is actually one of my favorite maps, and it's not on the planet. We're actually extended outside of it. They have mapped out basically the entirety of Mars, and they were able to create Mars, a virtual Mars, and where you could kind of move it around and zoom in. And the little Twitter bird thingies. This is before it was X. It's Twitter back then. But interesting. They're still birds, but people were able to kind of like pay for like a section or something, and they got their little usernames put on that section of Mars. It was like a little promo thing. But yeah, you can go in here and play around with it and see the surface of Mars that was mapped out, and then even be able to kind of measure certain things. So like in this video, I just wanted to see how it compared to Florida, because I'm pretty familiar about the size of Florida. So you're able to take whatever kind of shape you want. You can take some region that you're familiar with and place it on the surface. And you can see clearly Mars is much, much smaller than Earth, right? So, I mean, Florida looks humongous on Mars. So it's just a fun little application. And that's a QR code to it. But you could search it. You could search Mars and Esri, or Mars map, or Mars kind of web app, and it'll probably pop up. So this is another kind of fun one. It's a lot simpler, but I find it comical. This was a map. Oh, sorry. This was a map that somebody created to show the number of bird kills by plane through the state, like from each state. And you zoom in, you can see further, more points in each state. But to kind of show you, there are going to be airports. These are based on the airport locations. But it just shows you like what type of birds, like what their size, when they were hit, how many. And it was just a very interesting, very specific map that I thought was kind of funny. And it had a really cool, I just use an example as a really cool kind of legend type where you show so much information in a legend with just 1 point. So those are technically just 1 point where you're adding all of this information. So it's just kind of a cool graphic. And then here's the COVID. I'm not going to play it, but here's the COVID-19 dashboard. And one thing I like to bring up with this one, a concept in cartography and GIS, a big concept is having a message. So like knowing what your message is and conveying it properly. You could make a map and just throw some stuff on there and be like, I'm done, I did it. But like most other things like graphic design, you want to convey a message properly. And John Hopkins did a great job with this one, because if you notice, we generally with red, we kind of sequester red to bad things with anything really, but mapping as well. And in this case, the COVID-19 cases are red. That kind of triggers a message in your brain like, oh, scary. Whereas the green with the vaccines administered, right? So they are trying to kind of show, well, vaccine good, case is bad. It's, I know that makes it sound kind of like, and not belittling or anything, it's very important, but you can see where their messaging was there. They wanted to show, hey, yeah, we're trying to stop these cases, but look at all these vaccines that are being administered. So message is important, and color is a huge deal with GIS. And then this is actually with this is the Beacons group. This is an invasive, it's based on mosquitoes, but it may expand past mosquitoes, invasive species map that they generate. And I just want to show this because this is something we are affiliated with as well. And it shows just the locations of all those invasive species. And it's a lot of work goes into all of those points. They gather it from so many different places, but that's an interesting one that you can find online if you're curious. And then also vector serve. So vector serve is something new we're actually implementing. We are going to be the ones implementing it for the state of Florida. Just going to kind of show what we're doing. You see that Florida doesn't have any points, but this is showing density of different vectors and also vector-borne disease. It's a really cool application. You can go on there and look at it. Without an account, there's only a few things you can do. But the point of this is showing how with GIS and with many things, kind of everything going kind of digital, we're trying to bring everything together. aggregating data has become a big deal, like having it in one location to make sure we're seeing the actual true density, the actual aggregation of that data, and it's not in 20,000 places. Many people would and still would do a whole like thesis or a whole like project just gathering material so they would know like maybe the population of maybe this mosquito throughout the state or something. The nice thing about something like this, if we kind of can implement this and have something all in the same place, is you wouldn't have to do that. You go to one place, you wouldn't have to do a literature review, and you would have all of that information. And that's, as a state of Florida, something we're trying to implement. So I just wanted to show that. Also, hurricanes, you'll hear about talk about hurricanes this whole time because they're a big deal to me. It's the main reason I do GIS work in my job. This is Hurricane Helene. I think this is North Carolina. Before and after Hurricane Helene. So you have before on the left and after on the right. You see the little slider guy here, right? And this is an application where you can slide it back and forth and see the devastation. And you can just already see, though, without it me being able to slide it, how it differs between that. So this GIS is completely imperative during a disaster response for many reasons. Also, if you ever do go through another storm, I know we all probably have at this point. If we ever have like something like that happen, they have this really great application called Photo Mappers. And basically, if you are in an area that's been struck, like I've either been hit by a hurricane or other natural disaster, you can take pictures of the devastation and it'll pin it where you are. And this is used by emergency responders a lot. So they are able to go in and see, and it gives you kind of an idea of what the area looks like without being there. So it's super important. It's one of our kind of citizen science things that's available. And I believe this is not just Florida. I think this is throughout the entire United States. And then also Esri, which they make the products that I'm going to talk about the most. They produce a lot of data. Well, they aggregate the data for hurricanes, hurricane paths. So if you ever had to do any work on kind of hurricanes, past hurricanes, different stuff like that, it's a great resource to kind of find all the paths, all the information, the wind swaths, all that stuff. They do aggregate a lot of that, but honestly, most of that is actually, the data is actually gathered by NOAA. So most of that, they do kind of make it into an easy to use format for people though. And I just want to kind of plug about FGIO. So we have a Florida Geographic Information Office. So they are our basically GIS office for the state. And they have all of these meetings. They have these meetings following any kind of hurricane where you're able to join and see what resources and kind of communicate with each other. And they become very, very important after a response when we're all confused and trying to get everybody on the same page and share all of this information. So it is a big deal. GIS does become a big deal and essential right after those storms. Okay, so with all that, and again, you guys can put in the chat if you have any questions or anything. Just let me know. But I'm going to go through some GIS basics. If you get confused, it's fine. Like I got confused many, many times and I had to have things explained to me several times. And I still didn't get it until like maybe the 10th time somebody explained it to me slightly differently. So you stop me and let me know. But I just want to make sure this is informative for you and helpful for you. So not just GIS, but any kind of scientific process. This is literally just generally what you're looking at, right? So you're going to create data. Now you might be gathering data, right? So you might just go on a website and, export some sort of Excel file and that's your data. Generally, you're going to want to clean it up though, right? So if you have any programming experience, any coding experience, whenever you're trying to use data or implement data in some sort of program, you usually have to clean it up a certain way. It's the same case with GIS. You have to make it to where the program you're using is going to be happy with it. It's going to be okay with it. It's going to be able to read it. It's the same exact concept. Once you get that data, though, however you got it, you're going to upload it, and you're going to upload it into whatever program you're using for GIS. This can be an online program, or this can be something on your computer, a desktop program. whatever you're using, maybe you upload it to a server, a database, or it's just sitting on your computer ready to use. However you're going to do it, it needs to be able to communicate with whatever program you're using. And then it needs to be processed into geodata. And you would think this is what takes the longest, but this is actually the quickest step. Maybe uploading might be slightly quicker, but processing into geodata nowadays is super easy. The programs that people utilize, they can do it with one click of a button, right? So you give example, like if you have these coordinates and you're wanting to, or no, you have addresses. So you have addresses that you've gotten them from a website. Having the program basically look at that address and be able to place it in an actual location that it can comprehend in its system. That is processing it to geodata. That's what that is. And it's usually a click of the button. Now, before it was not like that. Of course, it was not that easy, but now it is. The longest step is design, edit, and analyze. So this is after you get everything all in there and you've done all of that. Now you got to make it look like what you want it to look like. You need to make it have the message you're wanting to convey. You need to analyze the data to show how you want the data to show. Like, so you maybe don't want to show raw data, maybe you want to show densities instead or something like that. You want to give it some kind of different meaning with that. That takes like 90% of the work with GIS is that. So if you've ever kind of looked at a map, any kind of GIS project or anything, all of them start with a blank canvas. Now, this may just look like a blank piece of paper, like it's just empty, but it's not. There is kind of location information behind there. So whenever I was in the screen, if I had moved my mouse around, these coordinates would change. Right, so the program knows what this location is, and now I need to give it something to reference, right? So it all starts with a blank canvas. It's when you start adding things in, it's able to properly place them. So normally they have some sort of base map, right? This is a background map. This is considered kind of like sound in the background. We're not really focused on it, but it's giving us some information that we might need. It's mainly a reference map. Something to give us some sort of location in our head. It's not front and center in any way. It is definitely the background, like the background on your laptop, on the screen on your laptop. But then you start placing the actual information on. So generally the next thing is some sort of boundary. You don't always have to have a boundary, but usually a boundary. This is the county boundary for Florida. And these are going to be county lines. This is a layer. So we have the blank canvas beneath there still, right? With all of that kind of reference coordinates for the system to use. Then we have the base map on top of that. That's still there, right? And then we have the county lines on top of that. So we're stacking things like a cake. These things are all there. So just because if I were to place another base map on top of this, you wouldn't be able to see the county lines, but they would still be there. So like I could still do stuff with them underneath there if I wanted to, or I could make the thing on top of it kind of slightly transparent. You'd be able to see them. It's all stacked on top. And this becomes very important when you're creating GIS. Everything goes into like the order of how things are placed. It's everything. So this was a spray zone map that I made for probably Hurricane Debbie, maybe, or Adalia. But these are spray zones. So these are laid on top of the county lines. The county lines are just lines, though. I have not made them. They don't have any kind of color in them. They're just the outline. So you're able to easily see those, right? They're not, we're not covering, they're not gonna, they're still gonna look clear in that we're still able to see the base map behind it. But you can see the shape files that I haven't made cleared out. They are covering that area, but they're on top of it. And I know this seems very simple to you right now. You're like, okay, I get it, but it does get confusing. You want to kind of get this straight in your head first and then move on. And then we have trap sites in this case. So these are on top of that. So if I had moved these in a different order and put trap sites underneath spray zones, then they would have kind of like a greenish hue because that was on top of them, right? And I know this seems all very simple, but this is where everything kind of lies. And this is why we call all of these things layers. You'll hear that term all the time. If you ever get asked to share some kind of GIS something, a lot of times they'll say, can you send me the layer file? They'll send it's a whole type of file named that. So this is why they're called layers, because they're layers like a cake. Or my little favorite example, like a trifle. So it's like all these different, very specific layers from different reasons. Maybe they don't always match like the trifle here, but they're all going to be in there and important. Oh, do you have a question, Anamika?
Yeah, just a curious question. So do the layers, I think when I raised hand after that, I think you answered it. Layers doesn't have to be same all the time, right? Is it the same sequence if I am doing a topographical GIS? Is it the same sequence that I follow?
No, so the sequence is up to you. So with a topographic, generally you're gonna have your base map at the back no matter what.
Yeah.
You could move it, but you wouldn't be able to see anything. So you want to have that at the base. And like a topography would have like a DEM, so like a elevation model right on top of that, right? And there's certain things where they kind of merge them a little bit, but no, it just depends on what you're doing. And there's a reading order in all kind of GIS program where you move things around, and based on you move them around is how you're wanting them to show. So you generally want to have your things out in front. They're your big message, right? Your big things that you want them to see, that where the eye catches first, should be at the top of your order, your reading order. So on top of the cake, right? The icing or the frosting. So did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So going into the actual data, we have two big groups of data. The first one is going to be vector, and that's what this is kind of referencing. And we have three different concepts with vector data. First is points. So these are like the trap data, right? That I showed the trap sites. This is one single point on the map. Now you could make the point show different stuff like that, like the birds hitting the plane map, right? It can show all kinds of different information, but at the end of the day, there's only one single location that it's referring to. That's it. Then when you connect two locations together or more, you get lines, right? So you're gonna, and that's all lines are. So when you see like a street layer, so like when you look on Google Maps and you have that street layer, all that is a bunch of dots been connected. That's all it is. And I know that sounds like it's oversimplifying it, but it is truly all it is. It's how the computer is reading it. It's how the system's reading it. And then when you connect all those lines into an actual closed shape, that's going to be a polygon. So our counties are polygons, right? So they are going to be fully closed in. They can be colored in. They're an actual shape. But at the end of the day, all they are points that got connected into a closed shape. That's it. And you'll see that when you do analyses and stuff, they'll break things down like that a lot when you're doing different analyses. Now, the other type of data is raster data. And people get split on this. Some people like vector data makes the most sense to them, and some people raster data makes the most sense to them. For me, it was vector data that made the most sense at the very beginning because that's what I was working with first. But basically, so vector data is you're drawing out something specific, right? So imagine you're drawing something on a piece of paper, right? If you're drawing something, those are lines. Those are lines that you made, right? There's no grid or anything there. Raster data is like pixels on a TV or pixels on a picture, a digital picture. When you zoom in, you see those pixels. And there are grid, and each block has to be given one characteristic, right? Or it's given a color based on a characteristic. And that's all it is. It's that one thing. And so think about with with images, when you zoom in, you have a block and it's a single color. When you zoom out, it does look like something different because you're so zoomed out, and it has such it has a high density of the grid. So it's got very small squares, so it makes it kind of a better resolution, I should say. So with these pictures, these are technically depicting the same thing. But if you look at the vector data, it's exactly what we're wanting, right? This is precisely what we're trying to draw. Where you look at the raster data, we do get some kind of discrepancies, right? So maybe if we were drawing this out, this area wouldn't all be yellow, right? It would maybe have a little bit of red, but we can't do that with raster data. And this is where we get the term raster is faster. I mean, the phrase raster is faster, but vector is corrector. I always like that. So raster is very quick. That's why we do imagery with it. So the satellite takes a picture from space, or you're looking at Google Earth, all that is imagery. And if you were trying to draw that as a vector, you would be there for a lifetime. Trying to draw like a real tree with vector, with point and line. You'd be there forever, like an artist drawing something. Whereas when we put it into a grid and we give it kind of like an ultimatum, like you pick one or the other, it's either this, or this, then we're able to get that imagery, and it's so much quicker rather than trying to draw it. But like I said, vector is corrector. It's going to be more precise. It's exactly what we're looking for. There's many different reasons you'd go with either of these scenarios. They're very different, but they have their reasonings depending on what you're doing. Here's just another example of it showing you. So we have a vector image. So if you get like an SVG file, you get an icon or something, or like you go into Word and you download an icon from their little system. Those are kind of SVGs. So if you zoomed into those, made them humongous, you wouldn't see any pixels because they're vector images. They are truly drawn out. They're high quality. You're able to do whatever you want with them. That's why you can color them. You can recolor them. That's exactly why you can do that. Versus if you took an image, though somebody originally probably drew this and it probably wasn't pixely when they drew it, they actually drew it. Whenever you get an image on offline, you bring it over somewhere, you just kind of paste it as an image. It's going to be making decisions in the grid, and it's going to decide this color, this box here has to be this color, and this box has to be this color. And that's where when you kind of make something big and it's low resolution, it looks really bad, right? You need to have it the right size. And that's where it can be kind of difficult finding like good images and stuff and high quality images. Okay, so GIS tools. So let's see, I'm gonna go through this part a little bit quicker here. So we have some different ways we would utilize GIS, different kind of, I guess, avenues. So databases are very important with GIS. You can have your own database, of course, you can use your own computer, but a lot of organizations have some sort of database, like a SQL database, SQL server, or something like that. Knowing where your data is going, how you're using it. And a lot of the programs work really well with some of those large databases that people will kind of purchase access to. Then you have app builders. A lot of app builders utilize GIS, work with a lot of the programs, and then statistical software is becoming more and more integrated with GIS. R, if you've ever had to do kind of any stats in R, they have an extension for ArcGIS now, where you're able to kind of easily communicate between the two programs and make things a little bit easier. Excel, technically, ArcGIS also has, or Microsoft has an ArcGIS extension as well. So this is all kind of being integrated together a little bit. But with current capabilities of GIS, so we do have a lot of different ways you can utilize GIS, and I could talk about like a billion specific ones, but I feel like they kind of go into all of these into like different baskets into these. So some of them are obvious, like mapping and imagery, but and then statistical analyses is becoming very, very relevant with that. Having that GIS right on hand, graphic design. At the end of the day, GIS is a large portion of graphic design. It is a large portion of that. It's a lot of work in that part. There's a whole section of GIS called cartography that's based on that. App building, a lot of the GIS programs are very, very focused in app building and website building now. That's a very, very big thing. And then 3D scene building. So I will warn you, if you want to do 3D GIS, you have to have the capability on your computer. It will run your computer into its grave if it's not equipped. So all kinds of different stuff, different aspects of GIS now. So with what you're going to use, there's a ton of stuff out there. I think I had a textbook in one of my beginning GIS classes that listed all the software. And I think it was like 3 pages long. And that was at that time. And I think that textbook was like 5 years old. So there's no telling what it is now. There's a lot of people that have kind of dipped into that field. At the end of the day, Esri is probably the most recognized one. So they're the most recognized company. I don't want to say they're the OG company. I don't believe they were the very first, but they are the first that got so big. They are one of our bigger companies that provide kind of GIS programs and it's GIS software. But they're free options for sure. So if you don't want to, because the problem with Esri is it's pricey. It's very, very expensive. They know what they have. So they do put a high price tag on it. And if you have a research project and you don't have the grant funding for that, you're not going to do that. So you have QGIS for that. That's an online free program to do GIS work. You can do honestly most everything in there. I know people who religiously just use QGIS. They don't even touch an Esri product. I don't have as much experience with QGIS. Mine's all with Esri. That's what we have here at the state. But QGIS, I know a lot of people, a lot of researchers that primarily use that. And then there's other options. So honestly, if you had like one tiny itty bitty thing to accomplish, you could probably handle it with Google Earth and Excel. There's a lot of features on there as well with that. And there's also free trials. Esri has free trials if you had to do one thing. Yeah, Anamika, you had a question.
I want to add just one more thing for students because there are a lot of students here. So if you are a part of a academia, like if you are part of a university as a student, you can always, and you want to try something, then you can always reach out to, for example, FAMU. You can reach out to your instructors or your teachers, professors, and to ask them that, can you have access? Can you get the license password? Because usually universities also buy a blanket license, sometime a department based or the entire university based. So that is one thing. Second, I have a question.
Okay.
So when it comes to as ASRI and QGIS, does the data storage vary? Like how does the data get stored?
Yes, it varies greatly. So QGIS, as far I think they may have a desktop option, but I'm not completely sure. They're originally an online software, I believe. But so that's all going to have to be, submitted to a server, right? You're going to have to upload it somehow to an online. And there's definitely some negatives to that, just with speed and everything, right? But Esri has, and I'll kind of go through it. Esri has a ton of different ways you can upload data or use data, depending on if you use a desktop application or use one of their online applications. It's going to really kind of vary based on that, but they are going to differ. And I will say there's not as many outside entities that work with QGIS as they work with Esri. It's not really the same kind of level there.
Okay. And while we are on the topic of data, Kyra has asked this question: what technologies or devices are used to collect the GIS data over a large area to analyze?
So it depends. So I'll go through a couple of different ways they make that a little bit easier. A lot of times, especially the citizen science stuff, it's phones. Like you're submitting, so they'll make like a survey 123, and they'll have it online, and people will submit their data with their coordinate, and it will automatically go into there, right? It just depends. I mean, like I said, you could be gathering it from somewhere online. It just depends on the project, what they're doing. But honestly, any of the other ways you would have gathered data, like any way, just about you could use in GIS. There shouldn't be any kind of limitation. Did I answer the question?
Yes.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, like I said, we use Esri over here at FDAX. That's just what we have contracts with. So that is what I'm going to focus on here. Like I said, you can get a free trial for this stuff. So if you wanted to try it out, or like she said, if they have access to a concurrent license, so something that it's like a library book where you can kind of check it out. Definitely utilize that because that is very, very handy. I do miss having stuff like that when I technically do with school, but you know what I mean. It's nice to have that kind of when you're on your own, you have to pay for everything, right? Whereas when you're school, you're able to kind of try stuff out like that. So this kind of goes into the question a little bit. There are three kind of groups of software for Esri. They're all called ArcGIS. They're all called that now. They used to be called like ArcMap and stuff like that. They're all under the name ArcGIS. So we have the desktop application, which is ArcGIS Pro. So that is downloaded onto your desktop. You open it on your desktop. You can access your files in your file explorer, right? You can access them directly into the program, easily bring them in. It is exactly what you would think a desktop application does, right? And it also has the most tools. So it's directly down on your computer. You don't have to worry about internet, server, all kind of stuff like that, unless you have that integrated. You can do everything kind of off the grid if you wanted to. So it's a little bit more limitless. So you're able to do a lot more. However, there's some things that you can do because the others are online that you can't do on Pro, that people will kind of rely on the others. So for the online applications, you have Enterprise and ArcGIS Online. So the difference between these is ArcGIS Online was the first one, right? So this is what they kind of created to have an online entity where you could upload your maps, upload your data, and share it on a website, create these applications, do all this like really cool stuff. Enterprise, it's kind of falling behind cousin a little bit. Like they're trying to get there. But Enterprise is created that has most of the assets that ArcGIS Online features to be centered toward organizations. So it is a type of license that you can get a bunch of fewer licenses with, and anybody within the organization can log in and view what's going on. It's very handy for that. We use it for hurricane response, 100%, because my boss's boss's boss can log into our portal and look at something I made. You can't really do that with ArcGIS Online. She would have to have an account, a paid account. So that was the kind of their answer for that. It's just a little bit behind ArcGIS Online. So if you're making something for yourself or public facing or something, ArcGIS Online is usually the better one to use for that. So within ArcGIS Online and Enterprise, there are several different tools you can use to build all kinds of different stuff, right? Applications, surveys, different ways to gather data, show data. And I just want to walk through them real quick. Story maps is probably, if you had to pick one to try, I would suggest story maps. It is the easier one to kind of figure out, to handle. It has, its interface is pretty easy and beginner friendly. A lot of people start out with story maps. I think my first big thing I made was a story map. The Formosan story map that we show at whenever we talk about the Formosan surveillance. But it's just basically a scrolling page that is going to integrate some sort of map, dynamic map or anything. So it's usually used for outreach or for anything for the public, like our Formosan story map. It's not normally used as a tool that's internal. It's dressed up and pretty to be shown to the public usually. And there's anytime you have something that carries a lot of information that needs to be added to it, story map is usually the one that you want, especially if it's a lot of written information. So you just scroll through and you're able to kind of add graphics, different, you can add tables, add different images, and then of course you can add all kinds of different features with maps as well. So dashboards are something that everybody, there's like a joke that like, like the Oprah Winfrey meme where she's like, you get it and you get it. Like there's one that's like, you get a dashboard and you get a dashboard. There was a moment where everybody was making dashboards, like during COVID, I think. Everybody, I made a dashboard too. Everybody was making dashboards. They were extremely popular because they were this one kind of screen that showed everything, right? So you had a dynamic map in the middle. So dynamic meaning you could move it around, you could click it, you could view it, you could zoom in. It wasn't a static piece of paper, right? Or a PDF. And then you could have all this information around it, like a dashboard on your car, right? It has everything you need right there in that one place, all the information you need. So that's the idea with this. So this one's like the wildfires. You can see all this information. And even when you move around, the information would change, right? So you would, maybe when they zoomed in, some of that information would be more on the information showing in the view, right? So it is very, very handy tool that is not too difficult to use. You can add some programming to make it more difficult and more customized, but it is probably one of the easier ones to utilize. Experience Builder, on the other hand, is not. Experience Builder was basically Esri taking their dashboard program, like creator interface, and putting it on steroids. It is like, they were like, what if you could do whatever you want, is basically what Experience Builder turned into. It has everything just about you could think of. You can make it exactly how you want. And if you have coding experience, you could just about make whatever you want. I've seen some very very impressive experience builder where kind of experiences people have made where I was like, you didn't code all this on your own and create this. They used this and they were able to kind of integrate it with very minimal coding. So it is a very, very handy tool to have. You're trying to make something very specific, but it is the harder one to learn. You will have to watch so many videos. I did. Our directory, which I'll show you in a minute, that she mentioned is actually created in Experience Builder. So it's just because I had to make a reason to use it, to try it. And it is a little bit difficult, but it's definitely worth it. Now, Survey 123 is going kind of back to that question. What's some ways you can gather data? This is one of the easier ways if you're having to gather data gradually. So for a research project, you're gathering it over time. This is great. You can make a survey for just yourself. When you go out in the field, there's an app that they have. A lot of the Esri products have apps now. And I don't even think you technically have to have an account. You can embed a survey onto a website. So you don't have to have an account technically, as long as you've shared it to the public. But people are able to go in, answer, put their pin down, or get their coordinates, and be able to automatically have that data generated into a map. Survey 123 is definitely handy. It's probably one of the most used Esri applications in ArcGIS Online. I would say it's definitely up there for sure. A lot of people use it, and it's extremely versatile. And I know we actually use it for a couple things as well. And then solutions, the last one. So if you like really just didn't know what you're wanting to do and you wanted inspiration, or you had a very specific idea, I definitely recommend going to the solutions page and just typing in some keywords of what you're doing, because there's a possibility you've already kind of made a customizable application for it. So this was me just typing in mosquito, and you see we have mosquito treatments. Actually, I don't even think I typed it. I think I just scrolled. Mosquito treatments and mosquito service requests. Those are two very specific things that our programs can use. Very specific. I wouldn't have thought both of those things would be on there, but they were. So there may be something on there, and they basically have created something where you can add in your own little flair, whatever you need to add in and make it your own, but it's like the start of it. It's like somebody went behind you and like started a project and you're finishing it. So it's very, very handy. Okay. So I want to talk about a couple of different, like more advanced GIS topics, things that just certain hurdles people kind of come across, or different concepts they come across if they do want to dive deeper into GIS. This is not necessarily going to be super relevant if you have like one thing you're wanting to do, like I said. Oh, Anamika, you have a question?
Yeah, so you now are moving towards advanced GIS topics. So question is, initially the basics you have indicated, we can choose the software free or the paid one. Then we go in the system and we figure out what kind of data we want to actually put it on the map or create a story map or whatever kind of map we want to create. So how much time do you think a person will take to get herself or himself trained to do at least those basic things correctly?
It depends on the person.
Yes, that I understand.
I would say, so how long? See, here's the problem. So GIS is like one of those things that you never perfect. First off, because they keep changing stuff and they keep updating it and making it better and adding all these different tools. So you never catch up. But to the point where you're able to like kind of maybe one of the simpler applications. So like maybe when I made the story map, I think I had been kind of going for maybe a couple months. But like that was it just depends on time. So like when I started and my big deficit was GIS, they were basically like, okay, now your job right now is to learn GIS. So it was my job to do that. So I spent most of the day learning and going through different trainings and stuff on Esri site and learning how to do that. It just depends on time you're able to put and the complexity of what you're wanting to do. So if it requires code, well, now you got to learn a coding language. So yeah, it just depends. I would say like making something very basic like that, like a story map, probably about 3 months of like, going through. You could technically try to pull something together within like maybe a month or a couple weeks, depending on your background. But Yeah, I would say if you're starting from scratch, you're only using ArcGIS Online, it is a little bit simpler than ArcGIS Pro. If you're not having to like make something public or anything like that, it just it depends on so many things. There's so many different variables you have to learn with GIS, and it's all dependent on the project you're doing.
So, and also with all these technologies, the more you practice, you become better. That's for sure.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
as a student, if someone wants to actually get themselves trained on the system, of course they have to practice on their own. But
Mhm.
what kind of resources they can tap on other than online
Yeah.
resources?
And I think I do have a slide at the end with this.
Okay.
I think, but yeah, there's a ton of resources out there. And I
Okay.
have, yeah, I do. I have a list of the different resources, things that I have used in my 6 years. So of learning this from scratch, things that I've had to use to learn this. Cause like I said, I had zero experience. I just have to go back to this. Sorry. I have like had zero experience when I started. So yeah, things that definitely helped me the most. I do have a list of that at the end.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So first advanced topic, cartography. Now originally map making was called cartography. That's what it means. Creation of maps. And so that's originally what it was made. But now cartography's turned into its own thing. Now GIS is the primary like kind of topic what we think about with map making. And cartography is now like a sub subject of GIS. And that's simply because it's focused more on the quality of the map and not like the analysis or what it's trying to accomplish. It's more focused on how does it look, how is it conveyed. So when we deal with like public facing maps, so anything like that, anything that the public's going to see, we tend to look a little bit closer at cartography because we want it to be easy to understand, but also look very kind of aesthetically pleasing to the human eye. And there's so many. So basically, anything that has been really probably talked about in a graphic design class is talked about in a cartography class. It's where graphic design and and science really kind of meet. GIS generally is like that anyway. This textbook, it was actually something I ended up purchasing for one of my classes, but it's Kenneth Phillips, one of the kind of bigger names in Esri. He is a cartographer, and some of the stuff that he makes, along with like Ned Cake, who's actually I think he's going to be at the Shruganar next week if anybody's going to that. He they together they do like a cartography, like a big cartography thing, usually at Shrug or any kind of Esri thing. And they show these really impressive maps they do. They also have a cartography MOOC, which is like MOOC, and it's just like a big class that you can take when it's available on Esri, on Esri Academy, which I'll show that in a minute, like in that list. Yeah, it's just how are you conveying your message? How well are you conveying it? So anytime you see like a very fancy map that looks like this kind of like maybe it's printed out or given to you and somebody's put a lot of work into it, there's a lot behind there, like color scheme, like whenever you color theory, whenever you pick a certain color versus another one, how they contrast, what's going to make certain colors stand out and not blend in well too much together. There's so much like where you place different things. There's so much that's involved with the cartography, and it's a whole an entire class. Probably even more so. There probably wasn't even enough time for one class. There was a lot of material with it.
I'm sure
So
they do
yeah,
make the map of good enough for the colorblind people as well, right? They
so that
do
is a
it.
great point. That is a whole part of color theory. In
Yes.
fact, there is a I can't remember what it's called now. It's Color Brewer. I think it's Color Brewer. There is a tool, an online tool, yeah, Color Brewer that you can go in and like it'll give you like color schemes that work well together. And there is an option for the different types of color blindness. So you can select the different color blindness and because that is definitely relevant. We do want to be cognizant of it. So there's certain things you avoid because of that. And usually if you're avoiding low contrast, if you're trying to make sure things contrast, you naturally avoid that. It's when you start putting colors that are similar on top of each other. So you don't want to put a red on top of an orange. So it's because somebody's, red color blind or something like that, they're not going to be able to see it. It's going to completely blend in, like those colorblind tests that you will sometimes see online, right? It'll completely blend in. So, but yeah, it's an interesting tool to use if you've ever had to do anything with graphic design, not just mapping. And I definitely use it all the time. It's a good tool. That's a great point. So another thing that you're going to stumble upon, usually you can get away with not focusing on too much. Sometimes you can get away with it, but it's kind of a huge concept with GIS, especially if you're trying to make something that's like going to be published in a paper or anything like that. And it's very like the location is extremely important. Like all of that information is integral to the research. You would want to worry about projections and coordinate systems. And the easiest way to explain this, it's always explained like this, it's almost a cliche, is the orange. So our planet is round, not flat. It is round. So, funny joke. But it is round, and because of that, it does not flatten very well on a piece of paper, right? You can't just flatten a spherical thing easily, right? It's going to be all misshapen, like this orange peel right here. So if you peeled an orange, you couldn't peel it perfectly. You would have to take some liberties, and that's what a projection is. A projection is taking certain liberties in certain locations so the area that you're focused on is exactly what it's supposed to be. And it involves a lot of math that I'm not even completely 100% on. And there's so many different versions of projections. And the reason why is because people focus on different areas. So, for example, if I were making a map for Florida, right? Which is the usual. I am going to probably use something like Albers equal projection. So that is a projection that focuses on the Southeast US. So it makes sure, so what it's doing is it's making sure that that area, the Southeast US, is perfect. There's no distortion whatsoever. And to do that is distorting the areas around it. So I would never use Albers for something over in the UK. It would completely distort it. It would be completely wrong. If I tried to draw something and get an acreage, it would be way off. So it becomes quite relevant. There's a lot of information out there. And there's a lot of simple, like, hey, if you're doing this, use this projection that kind of break it down super easy. But it is a large part of GIS. And it is kind of the more theory, the math behind a lot of our GIS. And I think that QR code is too I think it's a fun little story map. I think it's a story map showing kind of the theory with the orange and showing it broken down and how they kind of get to that. And showing how when it's peeled, it's just kind of dives more into that a little bit. It's a fun thing. And I've mentioned coding a lot. So if you guys are interested in coding, let's say you're trying to code just for GIS versus maybe you are interested in programming, which is a good thing to be interested in. And you're wanting to use it for many things. It's going to vary what language you're going to use. So with GIS, generally, I should say with Esri products, generally there's two programming languages that people focus on. There's Arcade and Python. Now, you probably never heard of Arcade, and that's totally fine and would make sense because Esri created Arcade. That's their programming language. That belongs to them. So they made it just for their products. That's what they use. And because of that, it's not like a handy dandy tool to, there's a cattail. Sorry. You show me a cat, I'm gonna get distracted. So anyway, so if you're trying to do some programming outside, right? Like you're not just going to be in ArcGIS doing programming. Arcade's not going to be your language you're going to want to focus on. Python is a great language to focus on because there's a lot, especially if you're in some sort of biological science. There is a lot of programs that focus on Python, and ArcGIS also has a lot of Python capability integrated. So just based on what you're wanting to do, if you're wanting to start learning some sort of code and you are trying to implement into GIS, those are a couple things to consider. Also, you can learn both. So they do say the whole thing where like, oh yeah, learning a program language is truly like learning a new language. But learning different programming languages is not like learning a bunch of different crazy, way different languages, right? It's like learning languages that are along the same descent, right? So they are going to be very similar, have similar things. There's going to be some minor differences of how they're kind of grouped together in syntax. So so just keep that in mind. If you're wanting to learn programming, I definitely recommend it. I learned it in my grad program, my original one. And it is definitely something that's helpful. And then problem solving. So yeah, this is the slide I was talking about. So there is a lot of resources available online, not just online, but mainly online, to be honest. It's the best place to go to kind of learn a lot of this stuff. The biggest thing, if you have access to it, which it sounds like you probably do, is Esri Academy. And they have, especially if you want to use an Esri product, they have so many training videos. And that's where like the MOOC I talked about, the cartography MOOC, that's where that's kind of based. So much information and videos. Some of them are paid for, like you have to pay for them. Most of them are free though. Like I would say maybe like 75% of them are free. And they have them grouped into classes based on what you're wanting to do. So it's very helpful. They also have a blog. Esri has their own blog and their own YouTube channel where you're able to go in. You don't even have to have an Esri account for that. And you just go in and watch these videos. I've definitely used them. I used them when I was learning Experience Builder. But there's also a ton of other YouTubers that do this, of course, right? So many. So you type in GIS or specifically what you're trying to do. Maybe it's Experience Builder, or maybe it's a dashboard. You will find something. It will happen. So there's a ton of people out there that provide a lot of help. And then colleagues. So one of the big things they tell you when you're making maps, especially like in cartography and stuff, is you want to make your map and then you want to show it to somebody who's non-GIS based. So like they are going to have like a different view. They're not going to be thinking about the GIS side of it. They're going to be thinking about it in a different way. And you want to show it to them. So you want to utilize that for sure. So even if it's like your professor or whoever or like a coworker, show them that. And especially if it's going to be something public facing, and show them like, hey, this is what this looks like. What are you reading from this? What message are you getting? So utilizing your colleagues, even if they're not GIS based, like they don't have any GIS knowledge, is super, super helpful as well. All these things, you can Google them and find them very quickly. I also use Stack Overflow. We're talking about blogs. Stack Overflow is great, especially if you're implementing some type of programming language. They have a smidge of Arcade on there, but it's mainly Python that you're going to find on that one for using GIS. Okay. So are there any questions about that part? And I'm just kind of show off my other stuff after this. Okay, no question. All right. So yeah, I'm just going to show you a couple things that I do that like I have done to give you an idea of like what maybe like one job would be and what you would do. But this is very, very narrow niche job, right? So it's not, you may get a consulting job if you want to do GIS you do a billion other things. So this is very niche. Just want to keep that in mind. I do want to talk about the hurricanes. So one of the main reasons my position even exists, especially with hurricane response, or especially with the GIS part, is hurricane response. That is the only reason they added GIS to my position when it was created a while back. Because you have to have a GIS capability within hurricane response in most types of hurricane response, but ours specifically because we're doing mosquito treatment. So to do mosquito treatment, you have to have somebody able to create spray zones or spray lines or whatever we're doing, usually spray zones, for an aerial treatment. So when they go up in the plane and do a treatment, they have to have that mapped out exactly. Because if it's not mapped out exactly, there's a lot of mistakes that can happen. We're talking about public health here, and we're also talking about people's safety. And these are going to be urban areas, public areas. So it's extremely important to have it mapped out. So this is kind of what happened last year. We had a bunch of hurricanes. I was very busy last fall, hoping for a slow fall this year. But we had 3 that we activated for: Hurricane Debbie, Hurricane Helene, and Hurricane Milton. And what we basically happens if we kind of move out to the area that's most convenient to be at, the closest to the area that was hit. I don't move out because they're terrified of me losing internet. But so I stay behind here. But we go out, we set out traps to see if there's a problem, and then we go and we'll do a treatment, and then they'll set out traps again to check and make sure we had a good treatment. So we had an effective treatment. And within all of that, there are a ton of little things that that have to be done, and especially on my end have to be done that people don't generally think about. So this is my flow chart that I made for my entire job of on the mosquito control incident response team. I made this last year actually because there was a thought that I may not be able to activate for one last year, and my backup was possibly going to have to take over. So they got scared and made me make this. So this is just kind of the flow of it. And flow charts are great, by the way, if you're wanting to, even if you're not doing GIS, anything like this, if you're wanting to kind of get an idea of where your project's going, I definitely recommend doing a flow chart, especially if you're a visual person. I think I used IO chart or something like that. It's free. You can Google it. It's like IO, like computer IO. But yeah, it's this is the flow chart. So this is like all the different things that I have to go through for each county. So we did 20 counties. I do this 20 times during Milton, right? So this just kind of show you an idea of like all the different things that I have to implement just for my side of the response. So it's a big part. And then also I had to throw in a bunch of extra stuff because I can't ever be relaxed or have time. I implemented a new tool called vulnerability assessment. I'm actually going to talk about it at the Shruggnar next week. If you're going to that, I'm going to go in detail about it. But basically, it is a risk assessment. It's a fancy, or not really that fancy, risk assessment where we take every county and we add all these variables up into a score. And the score, the higher the score, the more vulnerable the county is considered. And we make this specific to us. It can't be made specific to anything else, though. It's really easy to change the variables, very simple. But we make the variables related to what we deal with. So like we add in stuff, obvious stuff that would be for everything would be like fiscal constraint and like the storm damage and stuff like that. But also stuff specific to us is going to be mosquito control response capacity. So is there a mosquito control program there? Do they even exist in that county? Are they one guy with a truck, or are they a multi-million-dollar program? So that is going to change the risk, right? So then public health risk. Is there mosquito-borne disease there? Did they have some last year? Are they in a mosquito-borne disease alert or advisory? So we take all that into consideration and give them a score. And the score is based, I know I don't have a legend, which is a very big faux pas, so I have a legend on here. But the legend is basically you have the darker the red color, the more risk, more at risk they are. And the more likely they're going to need assistance and quicker assistance. So it's just kind of a handy tool that based on different things that were needed of me, it was a little bit easier to make. And I'm actually making something with my capstone with my degree on this, an application that kind of does this automatically for the people above me on the incident response team. But yeah, I just can't ever let anything lie. It's just showing what I was kind of talking about, what I do, showing what that flow chart, what the end result ends up being. So this is, I think, Milton, maybe, probably Milton. And it's just showing the spray zones and the trap locations and all that has to be mapped out and drawn and corrected based on all kinds of different stuff. We can't hit any areas that are protected. That's a big thing. So that's a huge part of my job, making sure we're avoiding areas that we're not supposed to hit. And then I also have a dashboard that we provide to the higher ups so they're able to kind of keep a status update of what's going on, where we're at. And I think this is probably Debbie. Just showing like where we're at on each county. Have they been treated? Are they still waiting on response? So they get a quick kind of view of what's going on. And then here's the directory that Anamika was talking about. This is a mosquito control directory. So it's public facing, it's on our website. But if you type in mosquito on fx.gov, you type in mosquito on the search bar, you'll get to it pretty quickly. And it's just, it's probably our most used application, to be honest, because it's one of the few public facing anyway. But people get on here and they are able to get information about their mosquito control program. able to kind of contact them. They're able to click a point and get the contact information immediately or use the chart. And this was built in Experience Builder. So this is very simple though. If you looked up Experience Builder applications, you'll see some wild stuff people have created. This is definitely played down a bit, and I didn't need anything too extravagant for this. And then I also do some other mapping outside of mosquito control. Even though the incident response was the main reason that part of my job exists, this is kind of expanded a bit more once it was added. So, and I expanded a couple of things too. So we have a conehead termite team. They are based in Broward County, and the conehead termite is invasive termite that has only really been found in Broward County. And we have an eradication program, and we've had them for a while. That have been working to kind of sequester them and eradicate them. But honestly, it's turning into more of a sequester them, kind of keep them in one area. They do a lot of work, and I do a lot of mapping for them to keep track of that. So that's just showing an example map of their nest, showing the different characters that they're looking at, and they're able to kind of pull it all into a report and get a better idea. And they're also implementing some better technology. We're actually have talked about, using Survey 123, where they can go in and immediately put in a point and it immediately pops up like in a map like this. And you guys, some of you guys probably already know about the Formosan Termite Surveillance Program. I do a lot of mapping for Johanna Welch. She was actually probably my first map I ever made. I think it sounds right. So she probably was, because that was around that time of year where she does all of that trapping. And possibly some of you guys have helped in the past or will be helping or have been helping this whole time. So where we just map out the positives and negative traps, and we do this every single year, and we have a story map that's maintained that's online as well that the QR code will take you to. But you can also just search Formosan story map. It's the only one in existence. So you'll find it pretty quickly. Okay, and that's all I have. I have this little bit of a funny, I love Arrested Development. It's one of my favorite shows. And I watched it before I took this job. I watched it all the way through. I watched the whole thing. And then I recently went back and rewatched it. I had forgotten about this part because wasn't doing GIS back then. And there's this scene at the very beginning where Buster, the younger brother, is apparently he had a cartography degree. He's working on a cartography degree. And they're like, they get lost out at sea, and they're like, well, get Buster. He has a cartography degree. Get Buster. And he goes and grabs the map, and he's panicking, and he looks at it, and he's like, well, obviously the blue part is the land. So funny. I crack it up every single time. But it's just a funny little thing on there. And just a little interesting thing that I was like, I never noticed it until I was into this field. But this is my contact information. If you ever want to talk about GIS, it's not like my 100% my job. Like, I definitely do a lot more. Again, I am a medical entomologist first, and then GIS second. It's definitely my secondary part of my multidisciplinary degrees. But yeah, I'm happy to talk about this. Or if you want advice, you want to show me something, get my advice on whatever you're creating, I'm always happy to do that. And if there are any questions, I'll take them.